Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tell Me Your Story. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and today's guest to tell his story is Anthony Berryhill, right?
Yes.
Give it up. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thank you. And very much thank you for having me.
No problem. It's a pleasure, man. Let's just jump right into this, man. Let's start from the very beginning.
Sure.
Where does your story take place? Where did you grow up at? Where were you born?
Wow. From all the way at the beginning. I was born in New Orleans, particularly the lower Ninth Ward, New Orleans. As I tell people, it's one of the few areas where it was better off after Katrina than before, because this neighborhood was very much the definition of the school to prison pipeline. So when I was born, I was born to a family that was very loving, but very much in structural poverty. So lower Ninth Ward, for those who are not aware, it's very much it was very segregated, all Black neighborhood. No one really left that neighborhood. So either the only way you leave is just sports, music, or other things. Um, so that's where I started. I was born a very quiet, introverted, super nerdy kid. And my mom and the rest of the family and everyone in the neighborhood said, "What the hell's going on? You're not, this is not how Black men behave."
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, because in this in a structurally, poor neighborhood, the only ways that you can kind of get out or kind of make it, other than kind of criminal crime, is just sports or music. And as being 5'1", overweight, and very, 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 very nerdy, none of that was going to work. So I went through the New Orleans public school system for elementary school, which you would think wouldn't be that crazy, but it was quite violent. There was a lot of bullying. The teachers were part of it. And there was just this narrative of this person is unlike us because he reads all the time and does video games. So you're not part of us. And so very much I lived a life. I mean, I'm skipping a lot of crazy stuff, but I lived very much a life of what they would call like an outsider within. So I'm in the projects, but not really part of it. So my life, across the various things I've done, I went, I was outreach program found me, and I went to a program called Summer Bridge, which spent two summers trying to get me up to speed. Another part of the story too is if you do what you're supposed to do in these schools, and this is, and I think everyone's figuring this out. If you do what you're supposed to do in these schools, you still end up poor. You still end up not knowing anything. You still end up having nowhere to go, and that's what happened to most people in school. So thankfully, Summer Bridge / AmeriCorps found me, and they pushed me off to a school called Isidore Newman High School, which was the same school as the Manning brothers that they went to. Very much an academic scholarship kid. Oh yeah, yep, they both went. And the school wasn't easy on them. It was the joke we make at my high school is that Stanford is easier than our high school. So I very much had to figure out, how do I read properly? How do I study when we're operating at the Marine level of intellectual work? And I had to reverse engineer that myself, which is a big part of my story. I got through high school, went to Stanford, was a debater in high school, and was looped into teaching kids in Northern California. That's how I paid my way through, because financial aid in 2000, looking at my calendar, wasn't as great as it is now. Professors found me at Stanford and said, "You need to be a teacher." And you need to be an academic. You need to research the structural violence stuff and poverty. So I went straight to Yale for a PhD for 7 years. And then I guess I'll just quickly go through, then I can answer some questions. And then throughout my whole professional career, I've been an inadvertent teacher. So people have found me and said, "Hey, you're here, you're surviving this finance company. How do you do it?" Or, "Hey, we have Gen Z people, we don't know how to train them. We're bad at it. Please save us." So that's been my story.
Oh no!
So
Wait. Let's step
Yeah.
back for a minute. So
Yeah.
you were talking. Let's go back to your grade school where you were that kid that was playing. You called the nerdy kid. You were playing video games. What kind of video games were you playing? That way the younger generation could kind of get a feel for it.
Oh, thank you for pushing me back. Okay. We're not talking Halo. We're talking Ninja Gaiden, Mega Man, the ones that build like old school Nintendo games that build resilience. which is a part of my story. Thanks for asking that question. So the ones where you don't have a, I guess that could be a metaphor. But those are the kind of games I played, and frankly, this is how I learned to read. It was just reading this volumes of text. So I didn't learn to read from the public school system, per what I was saying earlier. It was very much the various experiences I've had, be it grad school I was just describing, or being in HR or whatever.
So were you playing what they know? Like, were you playing Mario, Donkey Kong? Were you playing any of those games though?
Yeah, this was around the 80s, so absolutely. So I was born, I was a young kid right around when the regular Nintendo came out. So we had Zelda, which is impossible to play without a book. Zelda, Mario, and then the generations after that. Yeah, very much so. It's
Were you
honestly
playing
games are hot. Sorry, go ahead.
Super Knockout? You playing Super Knockout too? Mike Tyson
I
Knockout?
tried. I tried, but it was terrible.
Yeah, Zelda was pretty good too. I mean, like you said, you had to have a book in order to play that game. But you
Hmm.
said it helped you. It taught you how to read, though, right? That's what you were
Oh yeah.
saying.
Hmm. Yeah, it was a lot of escapism because, violence at home, home meaning my home neighborhood and school. Video games were very much a place where I could put my brain somewhere else from where I was.
So, also, I want to know too. Growing up in New Orleans, what was that like compared to anywhere else? I mean, and also
Mm.
for the younger crowd, I always like to ask this question: is this before technology or with technology?
It was the start of a lot of what we call modern technology. So when I was in the inner city, I mean, for people out there, imagine a world where there where cell phone, if you had a cell phone, you were very rich and it was very big. Right? If
Big
we
block.
did big blocks. If you're listening to music, it was usually on a cassette tape. I know it sounds ancient. The iPod was probably 20 years out. So I know that's hard for people to believe. Like email did not even exist, and if you're going online, you had to do dial-up. So you had to listen to the phone trying to ring and try 10 times before you.
Hey,
Yeah,
get off the phone! All
that's
right,
the funny
everybody,
part.
you made your phone calls. I got to get on the internet. I'm
Yeah,
sorry if you
yeah.
make a phone call. Let them know I'll be off at 8 o'clock. That's pretty much how it was, guys.
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't even have Google. So when I applied to Stanford, we had what they called Metacrawler. So Google was not around. Um, we didn't have anything that's good. So it's interesting you're asking me that question because I never think about that. I'm so normalized to all this technology. I mean, my God, when I went to middle school, that's when email really started. So it was a lot harder to find things out or get access to information. I'll say that.
Like, yeah, for me, it was like we were learning everything as we were going through school. I mean, it was
Yep.
all coming into play because I'm from
Yep.
the '90s, so it's coming into that, like, I'm in the in between era. So you're getting a taste of like what it was like before technology, before it really
Yes.
became advanced like it is now.
Hmm.
But like every like you were saying, so every grade we were in, we were learning something: typing, Google,
Hmm.
how to
Yep.
build websites.
Hmm.
Good times, people. Now you're living in them.
Yes, yes. It's a time warp every year when I see something new and I work with students and I have to tell them, hey, there's a world where there was no AI and you couldn't Google anything.
Back when you had to actually go to the library and do your research without the computer.
Hmm. I bet your audience is probably going to be shocked when I talk about the Dewey Decimal System. I don't think people know what that is
So
anymore.
please do explain so they understand.
I'm happy to. So if you go to a library, obviously it's organized. So the way they would organize all of those books is they would have how would you describe this? They had like this outline where certain subjects they organize books by subject. So let's say math or cats or what have you, and those were associated to numbers. And that was a quick way to use numbers to kind of go through index cards to find out where the book is in the library. I mean, that's the shortest, simplest way to describe it. Was like a numerical system to find books, and that's what we all had to do. even in the 90s and the early 2000s. And obviously, we have search engines now.
So
But
now
different.
explain to them what it was like to, like you said, you went to Stanford. So how
Mhm.
was it when you were applying to schools? Because most of the time now, as a senior or junior in high school, you
Mhm.
can go to get on the internet and just send your application out there. But back in the
Yeah.
days, were you able to do that still? Were you still able to access that, or did you have to do it through a different
Mm.
process?
Yes, it was. Well, most of the schools I was applying to were on what we call the common application. So it was online, but it was nowhere near as user friendly. Right. So you had to have a little bit of technical knowledge to even figure out the website. But it was like a combination of paper and online because everything was moving to online. So undergrad started first. When I applied for the PhD, it was all on paper. So we were just making that move to, I guess, what they call digitalization back then. Now, what was it like applying to college? It was in some ways easier because it was like the rates weren't as hard. I mean, it was always hard, but um, how do I put this? It was easier and harder. It was easier because it wasn't as competitive. Right? You didn't have as many people going, but it was harder insofar as you really had no idea what was going on. You couldn't go on TikTok and listen to some bad advice about college admissions or YouTube. Like people just weren't sharing information. So when I applied, it was very much the same way as me as a debater, which is I had to kind of use my street charts to figure out what is the real game here, right? Like what do I think they're looking for? Um, so that's what it was like for me, which was kind of figuring out, okay, I have a crazy story. How do I tell it?
Now, what led up to you deciding that you wanted to go to Stanford?
Ah, good question. Honestly, I had no idea what college was about. Like no one in my family had gone. The ones who had in the school I was supposed to go to, the high school I was supposed to go to, they went the football route. So what convinced me to go to Stanford? Honestly, it was I would, when you compete in debate, you usually go to summer camps to kind of like get in shape, kind of like with sports, right? Like you have summer camps, so you get in conditioning. Same thing with debate, but it's just intellectual stuff. My a whole bunch of things happened where the Stanford camp was the only one I could go to, and so I was on that campus. I had no idea what California was about, and it seemed like a pretty place. And I said, "Hell, whatever. I don't think I'll get in, but what the heck." So I wrote my application that I'm not kidding. I wrote my application that night because I was so sure I was not getting in because again, my high school was very competitive. That I kind of just speed wrote it. It was very much
You're just like,
a
whatever.
whatever. I don't. I mean, this is so beyond my understanding. I mean, my parents had no idea what Stanford was either. To be fair to them, because again, from where I'm from, if you go to LSU, that's considered a win. Like that's so rare out of that schooling system because it was so bad. So someone going to California, much less Stanford, you know, it was like as if I was an alien going to the Klingon Empire. It was like people had no idea what I was doing. So yeah, I applied and I said, "What the heck? It seems like a great place. It could change my life. What do we have to lose?" And I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, and I was thinking to myself as you were telling me that because I was thinking what you were saying earlier. There's a lot of people ruled you out when you were younger because they didn't think you had the skills to make it to that level. And for
Mhm.
what now is Stanford is a pretty good school by all means. Everybody knows
Yeah.
that. So what were people saying that you're talking about? Like, oh, this guy's going to be at Stanford? Like, wait a minute, what? Because everybody ruled you
Oh,
out at one point. When did the tables
yeah.
turn?
Yes, yes. Well, I would include myself in that in terms of the ruling out part because there's no script for what I did, right? Which was very much you're in this very violent, hostile, just dehumanizing school, right? And you're getting attacked for race reasons, well, all this stuff, right? There was just no script for just on academics. I'm getting out and going to a university. There was no script for that, so I ruled myself out too. Um, what I think the difference was actually this, not just my story, but the fact that I had that story and was still kind of pushing for things. That's what I've noticed consistently. which is getting a lot of credit for saying, you know what, people tell me as a black man I shouldn't be doing any of this stuff. I shouldn't be talking the way I talk. I should be out having 18 girlfriends and whatever. And the willingness to say, hell no, that makes no sense. I'm not doing that just because you tell me to. And I think people, various stakeholders who evaluated what I do, I think there's a lot of respect for that. The ability to say, this is my flag. I know it's the right decision. I know I'm doing the right thing, even if I get no dates, which was my whole college experience. Even if, my dad thinks I'm crazy, it's making the right decisions and standing by them and articulating what those are. That's something I've seen goes a long way. Whereas when folks try to rely on others kind of for comfort or peer approval, and this is something I teach my students, you can get a lot of trouble really quick. Very much in my whole life, what's made the difference was not just suffering, but like making a meaning out of it and telling people what's my story, why do I do what I do. And I've been pleased to see people value that.
So once you got to Stanford, I mean, like you said, you're the first in your family to go to college, the first to make it. What was going on? Were you feeling it? Were you feeling good? What was happening in your world?
I had no idea what was going on. None, zero. We did, yeah. I mean, because back then we didn't have YouTube. So this was around 2000. So I wish we had YouTube. I would have said I could have had a sense of what the campus was like and what the expectations are. I didn't have any of that. So very much, it was like when I was in high school, or I'm sitting here thinking, and like, let me be more blunt. When I was going to debate terms as the only black person there, right? It was very much who are these people? I don't know what the rules are, and no one's telling me what to do. That's probably the best answer. So when I went to Stanford, I had $100, a kick scooter, a Razor kick scooter, the ones that people used to ride on, and one big suitcase. And there was no onboarding saying, "Hey, Anthony, this is kind of how things work." So I wasn't feeling it. I was very much in the where am I? What am I supposed to do? Do mode.
Because now you're stepping away from it. Like you said, it was segregated at your school, right?
Oh,
so you're stepping into a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you're stepping into a whole new world now, where it's like, especially out of New Orleans, you're getting a whole different taste of what the world really is.
Oh yeah, totally different culture. I mean, for example, I remember, so in New Orleans, when we say barbecue, there's barbecue sauce. That's just a fun example. In Northern California, they say barbecue, they're just grilling. So I remember one of the first freshman events, they're like, barbecue. I'm like, oh my God, something I recognize. And there was just no barbecue sauce. And I thought, what kind of place am I in right now? There were like a lot of those little moments that aren't that big of a deal. But then like when you're used to a certain culture, right? And certain foods and certain norms, and I was just in the space where I'm just like, yeah, Northern California is different. And sandwiches are $12 each. And I don't even know the vocabulary these people are using. Right. So that was very much my college experience. It was like being fish out of water, trying to figure out and translate what I know. And then I think this speaks to kind of like what I was saying earlier about my career. In doing that, I've learned how to teach other people to have an easier experience. So I was a fish out of water, but when I work with my students, I'm able to tell them, this is how things work. This is what I wish people had told me. Both academically and
that's what I was gonna say. That's really interesting. If you had, like you said, you're a fish out the water. You're stepping into a whole new culture, like a culture shock for you, pretty much. And now you're sharing your own experience, your own wisdom to your students. That's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
So what was like being on the campus out there? Did it ever so somebody's wondering because you're in North California. Did it ever rain?
Did it ever rain? Oh.
Yeah, did it ever rain?
It rained. It was often very cold. So that's something that people don't know. Is that like in the evenings around January, it can get freezing cold. You would never think that about Northern California, but there was one of many surprises I had going there. So.
Pause. Tony, music group, you guys lied. You said it never rained in Northern California.
Yeah, it
How
rained.
dare you guys? last time I listened to you guys. So did you end up getting into like did you meet somebody on campus? Did you get into relationships or because people like to know
Yeah.
these things? Did you get a
Yeah, that's tricky. Um, I was in a unique space, to be fair. So I had no money, didn't know what I was doing. I had three jobs. I was teaching. And then not to mention, I mean, I don't know how critical do I want to be. The dating culture at Stanford was a bit of a disaster. um, because I mean, because I'll be blunt. There could have been opportunities, but not for my profile, right? Because like a lot of the other folks who were there were already very rich and very wealthy, even the other black folks. Or you're playing sports. Like there were just these narrow lanes that you had to kind of, or archetypes you had to kind of fit to be kind of legible in the dating relationship scene. And I'm very much the opposite of all of that. I mean, try telling someone, hey, let's go on a date, and next weekend I'm going to coach a bunch of kids about how to debate about nuclear weapons in Chicago. Doesn't work in America for having a social life.
would have been
So there was
interesting?
really,
A very interesting topic.
yes, and debaters love to be on nuclear weapon. So there was really, and this was tough for me. There was really no relationship history or success in undergrad or grad school. And a lot of that, not just because of poverty and my own cultural specifics, but I and I think this is a good point about me is it's like I just didn't fit any of those lines. Like for example, I always make the joke that I'll be the worst person on Love Island because I don't fit any types. um, so very much. I mean, I didn't have my first relationship until maybe 3 years ago because I. So it's good and bad, right? So it kept me out of a lot of trouble not being dateable. I didn't, I always make the joke that my STD tests are the most relaxed times on the planet, so I don't have to worry about all that stuff. No kids, none of that stuff. So it was a blessing. It was a hidden blessing, right? Because I was very depressed about that, but then I looked around like, oh, I'm seeing a lot of toxic relationships, fights, and things I don't have to deal with because frankly I couldn't deal with it. So I was just trying to get through school.
Now, I also want to know: did you go to any of the frat parties? Were you involved in the frats?
Yes. Early freshman year, I did go because there's really nothing else to do on campus. So, Stanford was in Palo Alto. There's not much to do. Didn't have a car. So the only thing you kind of try to do was, I mean, and maybe this is me being an optimistic young 18-year-old. The resident assistants would drag you to these parties or tell you have to go, and I would go and realize, oh my god, A is loud, B is kind of dirty, and C people are kind of crazy and drunk. um, so I went, and then I eventually just stopped going because I thought nothing's gonna happen here. And I started doing more stuff off campus. So I went to I traveled with more kids to go to tournaments. I was doing three jobs. So I shifted my focus because the frat parties really weren't doing it for me. Now I was in a fraternity. It was called SIGAP, but they were known as the quote unquote nice guy fraternities. In other words, not doing all the dating and shenanigans. But they were one of the reasons I didn't drop out of school because my sophomore year I was going to drop out. I was done. I was like, no dates, no parties, no nothing, no money, and I just don't get this place. And then the guys there who were very diverse, like they were like, hey, like there's value here, even if no one's telling you this. So so that was one of the few support systems I had that kept me from, running out of California and going back to New Orleans.
Now that would have been a total twist of your life. I mean, going back to in New Orleans, I mean, being locked back in there.
Yeah.
Now, what did you end up doing though after sophomore year? The guys kept you motivated. They kept you staying locked in.
Mm-hmm.
But kept keep rolling with the pace. What was next?
Honestly, it was just taking every semester by semester. So, right around sophomore year, like guys convinced me to stay. One big thing that happened, and this kind of speaks to my company, Elite College Hacker, or what have you. One thing that they told me was this: I wasn't making strategic decisions. So I had that view that everyone has, right? Oh, go to class, be the smartest kids, work hard. But one of the things that folks don't get is at that level of schooling, it's not about knowing the material. It's about being smart about the decisions you're making and like being very good, like being in good academic shape. In other words, like you know to read the syllabus, or you know how to write these papers, or you can figure things out. So it's about making smart decisions about where you put your time. So I was doing dumb things like taking math classes at Stanford. My God, I don't know what I was thinking. Right? It's like we don't, or So my my friends, they kind of sat me down and told me the things that I should have been told during orientation, which is don't take certain classes because they grade hard, or don't take too many classes, or don't take 8 a.m. classes. Like those kind of hidden things that rich kids were told, or California kids were told before going to Stanford, that I thankfully had a few people to kind of tell me, and then now I tell other people. So, so yeah, I took a semester at a time, started kind of being more strategic about the decisions I was making, and my grades went up. Dating didn't change, the lack of dating, but right around junior year, that's when some professors found me and said, "Hey, you got some talent here. We really need you to do this kind of work, this research that you're doing." So then I shifted brains into, okay, let me be a professor or an academic. And that's kind of how I got myself through it. Once I had a new goal, which was get into a PhD program that's paid for, I stopped thinking about the Stanford culture and started thinking more forward looking.
When did it become real to you, though? The idea of becoming a professor at school, you're just like, did you at least have that like in your back pocket? That's what you wanted to do, or you're just
Mm.
like, okay, I can see this.
It was more like I could see it. It really hit me actually. Again, I've been saying this a lot in our chats. Like, there's a lot of hidden rules. One of them was if you get, here's when it hit. I got a random phone call around March of my senior year, and I didn't expect a phone call because no one said there. So I had applied to the like. So I eventually went to. I was saying earlier, went to Yale. My advisor called me saying, "Hey, congratulations, you're in." So I was a little shocked because it's one thing to say I want to do it, right? It's another when you're facing. I think that accepting was 1.4%. Where you're facing crazy numbers, you can't expect to get in. You just got to make your shot. So when she called me on the phone, I thought, "Are you kidding? Am I being punked here?" But that's when it was real.
You're like, where's Ashton Kutcher at? Am I being
Yeah,
punked here? What's happening?
yeah. It's like you're not paying for me
Pinching
to go
yourself.
to school for 2 years. Yeah, you're not. Yeah, but I wasn't the only surprised. My department was surprised. So, I mean, Stanford may not like me saying this, but I was very much at the end of my time taking the classes. Like, I was not trying to play the Stanford game anymore. So, the political science department never saw me. I was taking psychology classes, whatever things could help me do what I was doing. So when I got in, the registrar was like, "Oh, Yale gave us a call. They told us you're going. We didn't expect you would get in." I'm like, "Oh, cute. Bye." I was in full senioritis mode with Stanford people by then.
Yeah, because like everybody, senior year comes, you're like, okay, I've done it. I have had my experience here. I'm ready to get to the next chapter of my life. I'm ready
Pretty much.
to put
Yeah,
this
it's just like
behind
I'm
me
not.
and get ready to get flowing.
Yeah, I think that's you were asking earlier. That's the change I made in my head, which was I went from being depressed and upset to what, I just got to get through. And that's kind of how I took my Stanford and grad
Now,
school time when I was there.
was it? Did they offer you a contract, or were
Oh,
you an intern?
oh, in the PhD program. Oh, yeah. I need to explain
Yep.
this. What happens? At least it was very much a you're in. It's like undergrad, but a little more serious. It's like you're in, and because it was fully funded or a full scholarship, here's how much money we're giving you to live for a certain number of years. So yeah, it was a contract, but it wasn't like an employment contract. It was much more like kind of you're an apprentice professor, more like it's like here's a bunch of money because you're not doing anything else but study your head off for about 5 to 6 years.
So for people to understand this contract, everybody thinks about money and stuff, but with the contract, there's rules into it too.
Yep.
So what did you have to stay strictly away from?
I couldn't do a full time job because the studies were a full time job and a half. I totally violated that. Because $30,000 in Haven, in a decent stipend, not enough, right? You had to survive the program. I mean, honestly. So the hardest part of a PhD isn't the dissertation; it's all the other stuff tied to it. So part of that contract was don't fail, and that seems easy, but it's very hard. So, give people a sense out there. In undergrad, people try to use they run to ChatGPT for a 5-page paper. Now imagine the professor is grading it, and the papers are 50 pages each per class of research papers. Like, so imagine 4 classes. Yeah, you know how quick that adds up. And don't even get me started on math or statistics that I take, right? So you had to survive that. Most people don't. And then you had to get through the comprehensive exams to give people out there a sense of what this is like. Imagine I hand you a 5-page document with nothing but bibliography. And I tell you, in 3 months, you have an essay exam, and the only thing you have as a resource is the list of citations. Good luck. That's pretty much what our exams were like. It was essay exam from hell, 5 hours, and people failed very much. So the contract was very much a don't fail and don't get kicked out. And also you had to do some work. I was a teacher at Yale. I was a teaching assistant, eventually a head teaching assistant. So that was my kind of my job, was grading papers and running discussion classes with Yale kids and all of their interestingness.
Now, once you became a professor, and did you start to see a different side of people? Did people start to act differently towards you, or
Yeah.
or was it kind of the same?
Yeah, I never fully became a professor, I'll say. But I was teaching and grading. It felt a little weird, trying to manage that because I mean I was relatively close to the undergrads in terms of age, and certainly as a debate coach, like I know how to work with young folks. Um, for the most part, it was kind of cool, right? Because people at the Yale, Stanford, Harvard level, they're very serious. Like as much as people say about admissions, I think the offices do a very good job. I know that's controversial to say. So you're dealing with folks who are very serious about thinking and like understanding things. Now, where it got weird was the grading. That's when you start seeing some hilariousness. Because sometimes, because those kids are like, "Oh, you gave me a B plus. That's a bad grade." I'm like, "No, it's not a bad grade. It's just hard to get an A here." So that's when it can get little wild. I'll tell you one story. So there was one time I did give a student an F. This was while I was at Yale. Now they earned that F because they didn't go to any of the classes. They didn't go. They didn't even have a teaching system because they were just totally ghosting. And by the so I was a head TA, so they had no teacher. I had to grade their papers. I was not happy about this. I found the student and I literally hunted her down and said, "I need you to tell me what class you're going to now because I have to grade your paper. I don't want to grade your paper." Totally ignored me. I graded the paper. It was terrible. It was an F. I get the final exam. This was a political philosophy class. And it was some essay about Marxism, and then she wrote that Marx was a capitalist. And I thought, I can't pass you. This is no, 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 no. I'm screaming in my head. This is my 5th year. I'm like, I'm going to do so much paperwork, and I've literally begged this person by email, please, please respond. So I gave the F, and with Saturday night, one of my many dateless nights, and my advisor at the time said, "Hey, can you come in the office tomorrow morning?" So when the grade got inputted, the F, there was a 6.5-page email from the student to the professor. The mom was brought in to have to try to protect her child. The academic deans were like, "Are you sure this is a legitimate grade?" So I had to pull up all the paperwork and all the emails. So yeah, it can get weird with grades. And like, I would say the news isn't wrong. There is entitlement and there's like bad parenting and all that other stuff, but that shows up in the assessment parts. So, but I've done this for so long that it's not a big deal. I don't have to deal with this stuff anymore because the vibe I guess I give people is I'm gonna give you the grade you earn. You get an A, you get an A. You get an A minus, you get an A minus. So I don't deal with that as much. But when I was starting, oh goodness, lots of stories.
So you, so people want to know. Okay, okay, people asking. So you went from Stanford, and now you were at Yale. When did this
Yeah.
happen? When that when did that take place?
Oh,
How did you
immediately.
end up at Yale?
Oh, sorry. Yes. In a lot of in my so around my third and fourth years, I start. What I one of the things I learned was just stop going to lecture classes. Because it's hard people to know you. It's hard to get good grades. So I started doing like seminars with started doing graduate seminars. Like so, I was taking PhD classes, and I did really well on them. So those professors would grab me and say, "Hey, like you're doing some good work here. You ever consider a PhD?" And I thought no. And then eventually they kept asking and with the levers for me. So that's how it happened. It was through taking my classes junior, senior year and kind of being recruited.
Come on over. I need you over.
Pretty
You're
much,
like,
yeah.
I don't know, man. Oh no.
But then they told me
Now,
that was paid.
before we get too far ahead,
Mhm.
everybody's graduating from high school right now, and a lot of them are unsure, because they're taking that next step. They're going into college.
Mhm.
What would your advice be to the senior that is going through the process right now? That you get just got accepted to college, to wherever. What
Mm.
would be like? Because you're the first line in your family, and for some that are
Yeah.
watching this right now, this is their first opportunity to make a name for themselves.
A few things. I think one thing is really own what you want because I think one of the problems is that people go to college trying to please their parents, trying to be popular with the girls or men or whatever their taste. And they feel like college is like this is the time I need to be the big man on campus and be the bad person or whatever, right? The best person of everything. And I think that's toxic, and I don't think that works well. I tell people, kind of own what you want. Like if you want to be the nerd, and look for that. If you want to have quiet Friday nights, do that. One of the problems people have when they go to these schools is they're usually coming from very competitive, socially and academically competitive high schools, and then they bring that into college, and then college is just such a different space that it's hard for people to cope. So that's to say, don't try to hit the ground running. Run slowly. Because even students who are 4.0 perfect kids, they don't know what's about to hit them when they go to a classroom where everyone's running really fast. When I say running fast, I mean like very high level like conversations and words you never heard of in your life. I'll give an example. Like I remember my freshman humanities class, a core class, and people were saying words that I'd never heard of from English PhDs, and these are my classmates freshman year. So to wrap it up, to be concise, I would say, try to know what you want. Don't try to listen to too many people, and start slowly. And I guess the last thing I would say to everyone, and this is really important, don't expect the college to tell you what to do. They don't. So if you need a job, do not rely on the career services department. This has nothing to do with Yale or Stanford. It's just that kind of a lot of people think, oh, I just go to college, do the right major, get a job. But I think you can probably testify to this, right? Like that's not the world we're living in. It's very much, hey, you got to figure out what you want to do and then find your own resources in the school and outside of the school. And that's what I tell every student, when I get them in Northwestern or Harvard, whatever, we always have the talk. As we would say, it's like, hey, like you're in this fancy school. Now is the time for you to be your own person and use the school, as opposed to what most people do is that they go to school, pay $60,000, and think the school is going to kind of draw the lines for you, and they should, but they don't. So I tell everyone, like, treat the school as you're kind of the school should be a means to an end. The school should be your resources, but the school's not going to tell you what to do. You have to kind of figure out what you want to do, and then pull everything in together.
Now, should they live on campus or should they, get their own place?
Mm. Uh, it depends. So in a lot of the top schools, you don't have a choice your first year. But if you do, let's assume you have a choice. I think it depends on the personality. I think for me, I tend to be a very private person and very introverted. So I would have done well with living off campus if I could have afforded it. Um, but I think if you can stay on campus your freshman year and cross your fingers not having a crazy roommate, that's probably a good way to kind of get to know who's around and what's going on. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But after that, it depends on how independent you are. Some people need to be on campus, right? You were asking me about dating, right? Like not on campus, that's not going to happen. But for people who are more independent, I would probably tell them, get your own apartment and like start being an adult early if you're ready for it.
Yeah, great advice. Because like you said, you never know who's your roommate's gonna be. I met my roommate, and we were like the complete opposite personalities.
Mm. And you never know what you see. Like I saw some crazy things that are not suitable for your podcast. So there are some advantages to not being on campus, right? Because a lot of kids don't have home training. That's all I'm going to say about that on your podcast.
You guys are wanting to know what he's actually referring to. I mean, there's some stuff that goes down in those dorms, and when you meet people for the first time, I mean, people are experiencing a lot of culture shock.
Hmm.
I still, like, as you were saying that, I still remember a guy screaming at the top of his lungs, "They're doing cocaine, Chris! They're doing cocaine!" He's freaking
Hmm.
out because he's never seen this before. But I'm like,
Yeah.
it's all right, man. Chill, relax, relax.
Hmm.
It's all part of the experience. Don't get
Hmm.
involved in that stuff. Don't get
Yeah. I mean,
cocaine is
that,
very bad.
yes, I agree. And I think that I would add that as advice to people, um, which is the more you could, if I was a senior again, right, I would tell people, I would say, well, let's talk to the parents. Is make sure your kid has some freedom before they go to college. My parents were very strict. It was a disaster because it could have been worse, right? Because it's like a lot of parents will think, oh, let me protect this kid, not let them do anything. But when they go to count, as you said, right, when you go to college, all of those rules are off. You're around a bunch of kids who half of them, at least at the Stanford level, half of them, this is their first time being a teenager. And that comes with cocaine and people doing naughty things and things you don't expect to see or do. So one of the things I tell parents is like, kind of expose your kids to the stuff. And I say expose, I don't mean having them do it, but they do need to know what they're seeing. Um, for example, like in my Stanford dorm, people were running around, and this is going to sound wild, like drinking vodka out of a bottle, right? Which is not that big a deal for adults, but as someone who didn't even know what vodka was, that was a problem. That's a problem, right? You want to know what you're saying no to or yes to. So that's another thing I would encourage people to do is like really do your research on like what is life like in college so that you're not shocked by what you see. So you can only say, not doing this, not doing that. What often happens is kids aren't told anything. Um, so they start making decisions they shouldn't be making, so to speak.
Also, I like to add too, if you see somebody with a bottle of vodka and you see cups of Kool-Aid, be careful. Be
Yes,
very, very careful.
yes,
That's
very much
not
so.
Kool-Aid.
It
You
could be
might
a
be feeling
lot
a
of
little
things.
weird after you drink some of that Kool-Aid.
I mean, and this is part of kind of what I do now,
You
right?
gotta
Which
be
is,
careful when you're in college. I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's made my post school career and what I do now. These are these are really important things to tell people, right? These things that are just not. I call it a hidden curriculum, as academics call it, which is like, how are you supposed to know that you're going to go to your dorm and people are going to be, you're going to see some Kool Aid and think, oh, it's just Kool Aid, I should just drink it, and it's like, how would you not know? You got to have someone to tell you, hey, this is what's happening. I try to be that person in my whole career. So being an H, I was mentioning being an HR, or being a teacher, or whatever, is I'm that person who says, buddy, that's not Kool-Aid. Or saying, hey, yeah, you don't have to do any of this stuff at the frat party. And I actually do have students. We have those conversations because their parents ask me to. They will say, "Hey, my daughter's going to college. I know you've been to these places. Tell them what's going on." Or a guy, like I actually had a UK family say, "My son's really sweet and kind. I don't want him getting canceled for trying to hit on a girl." So we have those conversations. We're like, okay, these are the classes you avoid, or these are the departments you don't go to. So
somebody that
those kind of insider knowledge.
so,
Hmm?
so for people that are asking me right now and asking us, if you hear some being advice from my own college experience,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody offers you jungle juice, if they're saying there's jungle juice at the party, it's not from something from the woods, and you hear something about a screwdriver, they're
Yes.
not talking about a screwdriver.
Yes, they're talking about.
I mean,
Well,
you
wait
see
a minute.
something like you see like a
Yeah.
cup that looks like orange juice or fruit punch. They're talking. They're not talking about like normal drinks or something that you
Yes.
found out in the jungle. It's actually party stuff, and
Yep.
if you decide to partake in the stuff, you're gonna feel the effects from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and this speaks to what I said earlier, right? Which is, I'm not someone to tell people not to have fun, but one really important thing in these schools is just asking questions, right? And just being curious, like, which I think is a good way to get in. So if you're like, that is jungle juice, like, you should be that person if you want to get into Stanford to say, what is jungle juice? Why is it called jungle? Like, what is going on here? I mean, that's what I mean by making good decisions, and like, it's not just taking things because people tell you. Which is ironically also a key criterion to get into these schools. It's like they're looking for people who have the kind of smarts to say, that looks interesting. What is that before I sign up for that? And same with classes. Like, I mean, I know we were talking about alcohol for a moment, but like taking classes is just as dangerous, right? Like, for example, I'll give you a real example. If you want to go to law school or medical school, do not take Intro to Human Biology at Stanford. Why? Because the curve is a C. So, like, it's not alcohol, but you could destroy your entire career by not asking the right questions or being curious or being strategic. So that's what I tell people too. Is like the hardest part about college, especially one at the Stanford or Harvard level, is that there are no instruction books. It's like playing Zelda from the 80s, right? There's no instruction book, and if you just do things blindly, you'll never finish. Whereas to do well in these kind of schools, you got to be the kind of person who's not just really smart, but very much like dialed in about, okay, why am I making this decision? Why am I going to this class? Should I take this class? Should I go out with this person? Should I not go out? Those kind of decisions are everything when you go to a place like Stanford or Yale.
Yeah, and you learn that as you go in life too. I mean,
Yeah.
it helps you decide what you're going to do. It's your own
Yeah.
decisions. Meet with the right people, get the right friends that you can actually trust. That will help you from drinking jungle juice and keep your mind focused on the right things.
Yes.
Because that's the most important thing. You're there for school, but at the same time, you can ease back, but focus on getting your career done. Get that done,
Yeah.
and if you got some homework to do, get that done first, and then enjoy your weekend or whatever you do. But
Mhm.
I'm not saying to go out and do it every weekend. Do it every once in a while. Just enjoy
Yeah.
yourself. Enjoy the experience. That way you can say later in life, like, yeah, I had my fun.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Very much just very much moderation
tell
and just.
everybody what the difference between.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
I'm
Say
sorry.
that question again. Say it again. Sorry. You said the difference
I
between
was
what
gonna say.
things?
So what was like Stanford and Yale,
Hmm.
culture wise?
Culture. Ooh. Um. Hmm. I'd say at Stanford, it's very much tied to the local community. So, and this is something people didn't tell me. A lot of the high schools in that area are pretty affluent. So, like, they're like very much the feeder schools, and that drives the culture. So, when I was there, I mean, half the people already knew each other. Now, I should have known this because I was also a debater. So, coaching these kids, I kind of knew what schools they were from. But that's a lot of it, which is very much Northern California, we're all very calm and chill kind of attitude. But the culture, so we are calm on the outside, but very intense on the inside. That's very much the culture. So, for example, if you talk to a Stanford person, they'll talk about the duck culture. Like a duck looks calm above the water, but they're kicking like heck, trying to keep afloat. That's very much a Stanford person. Like, so people are working really hard, but they like to act as if they're not working hard. If that makes sense. Yale was the opposite.
Yeah.
Yale was very much everything is on the open. We're going to tell you what the culture is. We're always intense, kind of that East Coast vibe thing. And also, I would say, Yale was making that turn from its history. In other words, I don't know if you've heard of Skull and Bones, the secret society, but when I got to Yale, it was just making a generational shift from, old money, secret societies control everything, having a rich family matters, to a more modern Yale where people were like, oh, that's really lame and not inclusive. So I saw Yale right at that turn when it was becoming more modern. Um, and where it was kind of pushing away a lot of the things you may have heard about on the news about old Yale culture and such.
So, was Yale the last stop? Did you go to another school?
Yale was the last. Sorry, say that question again. Let me make sure I heard it right. Um, Yale
Was
was.
Yale
I'll say,
the last stop for you, or did you have another college that you had to go to?
yeah, it was the last school I went full time. It was the last place I went as a full time student. And then after that, actually, a few of my former students said, "Hey, come to Austin." They said to me, "Hey, we're working at this financial research company, and it'll pay more than being a professor." Most of all, they said to me, "You're weird, and Austin keeps it weird, and you like nerdy stuff. Come to Austin." And I've been here for 15 years, so that was my next step, which was working at a financial research company, and then eventually starting my college admissions company too, doing both at the same time, which is your next part of the story.
Let's jump into it, man. Let's hear about this. Let's. I want to hear more about it.
Yeah. So the short version is, I left my PhD at year 7, because I realized that there was going to be no professorship for me for what I was studying, and the jobs didn't pay anything at the professor level. So I worked at this research company that hires consultants and helps them do research. I'm just going to keep it kind of broad. Uh, so I started from the bottom. So very much a learning how to answer 100 phone calls a day, junior associate, even with 3 degrees. um, Starting a team, working with private equity firms, helping them do research. I know that sounds really boring because it was kind of crazy actually, like really high speed
Sounds like
type
a
A
good time.
people. Yeah, type A people, and the contracts you're managing are higher than my family net worth, a million, 2 million each. And then at year 4 of that job, the company I worked for said, "Hey, we need to train all these Gen Z kids, and we're bad at it," and they were bad. So they said, "Hey, you're a teacher. Start our corporate training program with no money." So I did that for 4 years. It was, cost me a lot of hair in terms of the stress, but that's what I was doing. I was very much I turned from the worker to, how do I help this company teach people so that they have a better experience and that they actually, that's where my mind went. So I redid the entire onboarding program from scratch, almost from scratch, which pissed off a lot of senior executives. There was a reason I didn't get promoted very often because I was that guy saying, "No, you're not going to give a pricing lecture to a 23-year-old. That makes no sense." Or no, yeah, just like I was very much the teacher mode of I don't want them to be bored. So we're only going to teach them what they need to know. And there's a good reflection on that because most companies do the opposite. They're very much senior executives want to talk at these Gen Z kids and bore them to tears and feel good about themselves. I'm very much the opposite as an educator, where I'm just like, I don't care what the management says, we're not doing this, or this is not good pedagogy, what have you. So I did that. There were a lot of things that went down. Suffice it to say, by my doing that work, it had professional consequences. I was denied promotion 4 times and a lot of money. I'm sugarcoating a lot of stuff. So then I quit at year 8 and started this college admissions company, which actually one of my former debate students made me forced me to create. He said, "Hey, I don't want to see you treated like this by a company, and you're really good at teaching people, and you helped me get into med school, so create the company." And I said no. You'll appreciate this story. And then the 5th year, he bugged me about this. He's like, "Come hang out with me. Come to Vegas." Very, very, very affluent doctor there, trauma surgeon there. And we did have drinks. He took me to Oriel. It's a very famous wine bar. And 5 drinks in a happy hour, he said, "Here's my phone. I've created the website. You're doing it. Kids need you." So that's how I started the college admissions thing. It was debaters saying, "Hey, we're tired of people lying to us and screwing us over in college admissions. You've taught us how to do debate. Can you please figure out a way to do this in admissions?" And that's kind of what I do full time now. So it was very much a calling. Just not education and all this stuff was not what I wanted to do. But I've been asked to do it.
So what was it like when you first started kicking it off, when you were first getting into the swing of things? Doing it all by yourself, finally, for the first time doing it.
There was a lot of imposter syndrome, right? Because I didn't, I mean, most people who do college admissions work, let's be blunt, right? They're Caucasian and male. They're usually extremely extroverted, outgoing, right? They're usually working on admissions committees. The problem is, I mean, that's comfortable, right? Like there's a business model. You don't have to bust your tail. Because I came from a non-traditional background, it was hell, right? I did not know how to price people. I did not know what the tactics were. So I very much had to come up with my own strategy to teach people how to get into school. So it was a lot of bootstrapping, a lot of dealing with crazy parents sometimes, right? Like, so I've gotten good at that, telling whether or not a parent's loco or not and not work with them. So there was a lot of like growing pains that I'm sure you can ask me about, where it was like, it's the same story, right? There was no instruction book. And my students forced me to kind of writing one.
Well, what did you say is the toughest challenge, though? Like, out of your experience, what's like a student?
As a student or with students? Sorry.
With a student.
Oh, yeah. There's a couple. I think one of them is, it won't be as, one of them is when a student says they want something but don't. So they will say things like, "I want to get into MIT," but they don't answer my emails to do drafts on their essays. Doesn't work. That's the hardest thing. When someone's like, "I don't want to answer my emails. I don't want to do this. Instead of just saying, "I don't want to do it," just kind of ghosting. That makes things really hard. Because then you know what's going to happen. It's going to be the day before the deadline. That's tough. That's tough. The second difficulty is actually with parents. So there are a lot of parents who they bring, how do I put this? A lot of people get this wrong about college admissions is they think, "Oh, this is the time for me to prove I'm smart." Or this is the time that the Harvard committee can say I'm a great parent because my kid got in. And that kind of attitude makes it near impossible to get those kids in because it shows up in serious places. So some challenging moments would be one of the toughest is when a parent will do let me pause for a second. I've learned to ban parents from the essay. This is an example. I do not let them write it, touch it. When parents break that rule, like they'll look at their kid's laptop, all hell breaks loose. Because the parents are reading something that's not for them. It's for the admissions committee. So imagine if a kid says something like, "My parents are very overprotective." An overprotective parent will have they'll blow up gasket. But the committee needs to hear that because they need to know who the student is. So that's when things get really hard, when parents They try to control the process. Sometimes they'll try to treat me as their kid. I don't tolerate that. Or they'll say, I think this should work this way, because they think the college admissions process is like checking your kid's math homework, and it's nothing like that. So that's when it gets really hard, when parents misbehave. And I will tell you this, I've worked, a lot of college admissions people have asked me to write a book about how parents should stay out of the process. If I get that time, I'll write that book, because there's a lot of stories to share.
Save it on the calendar.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He has quoted that he will write a book when he gets the time.
Yes.
You heard it here first, folks.
I will write a book on crazy parents in the college admissions process.
Okay, what's the title going to be so people know? Do you have an idea?
Oh. Ooh, give me a second. How parents kill their kids' applications. Something like that. Because they do. Right. I mean, I know I've been kind of vague about it, but a good example of this would be, I will always tell people this. I can tell when someone's written an essay with AI or their parents wrote it. Because when you read 100 of these things, you can tell when a 17-year-old is writing something. So my favorite story would be, it was one parent, worst mom ever, worst client ever. And their kids didn't get in anywhere because they didn't listen. We work on an essay kind of 2 days before the deadline, and I get a phone call from her saying, I don't like the work you're doing. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's your kid's essay. She's like, you don't talk about me in it. I'm like, it's not about you. So she rewrote the essay without any permission, and the first line was a quote from Forrest Gump, like, life is a bunch of chocolates. I know that may be a little dated for people. And I was like, and the rest of the essay was my mom. Yeah. You heard what I said. Yeah. The mom rewrote the essay.
Were there shots fired? Was she trying to talk crap on you? Was she trying to say you look like Bubba Go?
That would have made more sense than what she wrote. It was one of the worst essays I've ever seen. And I had to get her on the phone with her son. I'm like, this is not about you. I'm trying to get your kid into Stanford. What are you doing? So sometimes I have to be that disciplinarian. And she, of course, didn't listen and kept doing it. And at some point, I got, we parted ways because she was a narcissist. And it was more important for her to feel validated than for her kid to get into school. And they didn't. Because it's...
Yeah, I mean, that's usually, like, you hit a bad point, though. It's because a lot of times parents do that. They want you to go to their alumni or wherever. They want you to go to their choosing, but it really comes down to the kid. The kid wants to, wherever he wants to go to college, wherever he feels like this is the right spot for him. Because a lot that's going to be the hit or miss when he gets to that school, because he's not going to have that drive, that motivation if somebody else made that decision for him.
Yeah, it's like the story I said earlier, right? What I don't think the public gets about admissions work is, and they don't think about it from the college's perspective, right? If a parent's being a helicopter parent or over controlling, and it's seeping into the application, what those parents don't get is that there are other adults who are saying, I don't want to deal with this crazy parent. Right? Or if we take this child, I have to take all of this drama with me. And then the kid gets rejected because that community is not going to sign up for that. And then we'll never say this out loud. Right? But I know because I worked with, Yale administrators.
Right.
I've read applications. Right? It's people, I get this, one of the lessons I always tell people is like, parents don't understand that they're talking to other adults when they're making these decisions about their kid. So if the parent is like, or if a kid writes an essay that says, and I've read these, my mom is awesome, I'm a good, obedient child, right? That's an auto rejection. Particularly I'll just be specific. Like one of the reasons my kids asked me to help them was because it was Northern California Asian American students who were told by their families terrible admissions advice. They were told, right, how much you love math and science. Well, if you're applying to Stanford, that's a terrible idea, right? It's one of those competitive majors. So it was a lot of that stuff that I intervene and say, hey, this isn't, think about it from the judge's point of view. They don't want to hear this, which is very different from what TikTok or Reddit will tell you, which they'll tell you, talk about passion projects and how much of a great student you are, not knowing that you're like you're boring the poor admissions officer to tears, doing a lot of that popular advice. Yeah.
Put him to sleep.
I mean, this is a tough job. I mean, I've
All
tried,
right.
right? Let's just put it that way.
So, what are you currently working on now?
Yeah, I'm currently in Austin, Texas, and I work for myself doing the submissions thing. I have various different projects. I'll be teaching at a debate camp in about 2 weeks at UNC. And sometimes I'm asked to teach. So I'm a part-time teacher for Harvard, believe it or not, and in classes on negotiation, and there was a public policy master's thesis class I was teaching this spring. So I do a whole hodgepodge of things, but mostly either consulting in education or mostly just getting kids into the places they need to go. Be it Yale, Harvard, sometimes the big fancy, sometimes I'm doing interview training. So, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs. I like to say, like, I get my students more money than I make, is what I like to, is the way I put it.
As you reflect on your story, when people kind of counted you out when you were younger, and now seeing what you have accomplished, how do you feel?
I feel like I've lived 80 years in 44. It's been a wild ride. But I think on reflection, I would say that it's not the path I expect, but it's a path that I needed to take. It's very much the way I was born. I think, if, for those who are more religious, like I would argue it's very much a divine intervention. So many places, right? Like so many times I could literally be dead, where something happened, right? So it's many times I was kicked, thrown downstairs. Oh my God, the love of violence, right? In my public school. It was only by God's grace I didn't die there, right? And I think there's a meaning behind that, which is, I wouldn't have survived all of this if there wasn't a purpose. So I think that's kind of the point, which is finding that meaning. And for me, that meaning has been, yeah, I've gotten the short and the stick in all these schools and environments. Maybe my purpose here is to tell everyone, okay, this is what you're missing. And that's what I've always done. So financial research company, it was me telling them, you suck at teaching kids. Right? Or sometimes it's, at Yale, sometimes it's me saying, your system, because as the person who's been on the receiving end of that nasty stuff, I've been able to have a very accurate view of reality. And I think that's been that's something I've been able to use to help other people.
That's good, though. I mean, because everything that you've been through, you're able to help other people along with it. It could have, it's that's very motivational too, because, like you said, you could allow that to defeat your whole purpose, but you were able to withstand it and say, no, I know that I can help people out here, and I'm going to continue to live my life. And you got look at your resume shows it. You went to Stanford. You're at Yale. Yeah. Now you're working at Harvard.
Yeah.
I'm like, what else are you going to say? You've been in the military too?
Well, if the Space Force had existed, I would have gone in the military. I would have to get in shape, of course.
We never know.
But, yeah, there was no Space Force. Oh, I would totally have done that. But honestly, I mean, and when you look at my resume, it's just me. It's very much a series of pivots, right? So there was no guarantee I was going to get into a PhD program, but the reason I did it was because I listened to people who were really good mentors of mine, right? Or the debate thing. I didn't tell that story, but the only reason I started debate was because my high school mandated that we take speech and debate as a required class. And the debate coach would not shut up until I joined the team. So it's one thing for the audience is just when you see opportunities or things you're like, I don't really know what's going on, do some investigating before you say no. Because that's where the resume comes from, right? Because Stanford, yeah, that was not on my bingo card. It was me listening to someone who, frankly, knew a lot more than I did, saying, "Huh, hey Anthony, consider Stanford. They'd really like what you're doing," or "Hey, look at this PhD program. They'll pay for you." um, Whereas I think a lot of people, when those opportunities come up, they just say no because it's not familiar. Whereas with me, nothing's ever been familiar. So I'm used to that. That's how you see the resume. I'm so used to making that pivot really tactically and then seeing where that goes. Which, frankly, given my life history, I didn't have a choice, and it's kind of worked out, I think.
Yeah, worked out to the best, man. But
Yeah.
as we begin to wrap this thing up, Anthony, I just want to simply say thank you for coming on and sharing your story, sharing your experiences.
No, my pleasure, and thank you. We got through all the technical stuff, but in terms of the audience, my email is anthony@elitecollegehacker.com. I'm here to serve. So anyone, I mean, I consider it my mission is to tell all the hidden secrets that elite institutions don't tell. Like, well, what are you supposed to do? What are the rules? And maybe that's my way of kind of making a change in the world. We'll see.
And don't worry, everybody, I'll put it down in the description. You'll be able to see all that stuff, so you'll be able to contact him.
I'm also at my website, www.elitecollegehacker.com. So those are, and also on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to chat more about this stuff, I'm happy to. I love talking about education and how we can make it better.
All right, let's wrap this thing up with 3 random questions. For the paranormal crowd, let's, because you're from New Orleans, did you ever run into any voodoo practices as a child during your growing up in New Orleans?
Yeah, indirectly. I mean, it's very much, you will hear about it, So the most I know was people who have little voodoo dolls. That's real. People do have them. Most of my exposure, honestly, was if you're around Canal Street or the main party areas, you'll see some voodoo stores. Not kidding. Particularly Bourbon Street, which is, maybe for your audience, maybe not my kind of place either. It kind of smells over there. But that's where you'll see a lot of that stuff. You'll see the stores, and occasionally someone will say, if you act up, here's my doll. Wild place.
All right. For the last 2 questions, I'll pass the microphone over to you and allow you to ask me the final 2 questions.
Okay. What makes you compelled to hear people's stories? I'm curious. Like, where did that desire come from? Because not everyone wants to listen to a story.
I'm very open to, just hearing people, hearing, being in other people's shoes. I always like to hear from the other side. Every time there's an argument from one person that, tell me how bad this person is, how, what's going on here. I always like to hear from the other side as well. But it got to a point where, for me, to really answer this question is just traveling, being out on the road, and meeting new people, hearing their stories. I became more open to the world as I traveled.
Sure.
And once I got to know more people, it became a natural instinct where I love to just sit back and kind of just relax and, go back and forth, talking to people and hearing their stories. Because honestly, if we really think about it, I mean, people that are watching, listening to this right now, we're all living a story, right? We're all living this thing called life. We're doing life together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like to hear what's going on in yours. That's the whole reason this platform exists. You can come on here and share your experiences. That way, whoever's going through the same, experience with their own, world, or something that you've done in your past that you kind of would like to tell your younger self.
Yeah.
Now you're kind of getting the chance to do that through this platform.
Awesome. Wow. One more question. How would you know you've been successful with the podcast, let's say?
How would I know I've been successful with the podcast? For me, to answer this question is if I get out and people, learn something from these stories, and that they actually, because I've had people message me and say, thank you, Chris, for having him on or having her on. It has really helped me in my own experience. To me, that means a lot to me. That's successful to me. To hear exactly what I set out for this podcast to do.
Yeah.
Is for somebody to share their story, and then it help somebody else along the line with their own experiences.
Mhm. I'll say for your audience, thank you for doing this. Because I think throughout my story, it's very much feeling like alone, not knowing what's happening. And I think what you're doing through sharing these stories, like you're filling in what I wish I had when I was 17, 18, which is just learning from people's experiences, not just experiences, but their point of view. And I think in a world of AI and people lying and scamming and not telling the truth, that kind of honesty and transparency is what we need more of. So thank you.
My pleasure, man. Other than that, guys, this is your host, Chris Baker. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And like you said, if you want to contact Anthony, he has sent you everything. It will be down in the description. You'll be able to contact him. Until next time, though, peace out.
Thank you.